Good afternoon and welcome to Integrated Pipelines for Private Public Clouds with Jenkins, Artifactory, and more specifically Cloud Foundry, which is majority of my talk today. But I do want to kind of share some of my thoughts around kind of what's happening in the industry as we kind of go through this. A little about myself, just so you know who I am. I am a cloud native enthusiast. If you don't know what the term cloud native means, you will know by the end of this presentation. Prior to taking this role, I used to work at VMware, so I spent a year on the infrastructure side, which was a really great experience for me to understand soup to nuts the data center. I really got a great understanding of it. And then prior to that, I spent 22 years as a software engineer. So I've been spending most of my life building stuff, and I actually find that to be the most interesting piece. So hopefully you guys feel the same way. So I think we could all agree that if we took a look at these companies here, these are the companies that have definitely used software to change their industries, right? Software is a very tough business, as I'm learning by working at Pivotal, which is a startup company. But it's a very difficult thing to do. Things change quite frequently, and so we have to change with it, right? If you look at the way that these companies use software to change the industry, things like Uber really changed the way that we looked at car service and transportation in the city. I mean, I Ubered on the way out here. The guy made me feel sick, though, because I kind of got road sick because he kept going back and forth really fast. Square, which has impacted my life as well, is a company that really changed the way and the location and where we do business transactions. My wife uses Square all the time for her business. And then Netflix, which I think really changed things a lot, right? Not necessarily so much from the entertainment and media and streaming of that, but also the way we build applications. Of course, I think Blockbuster would feel differently about that. But if these companies can use software to change industries, then what I feel is that Cloud Foundry, and when I talk about Cloud Foundry here, I'm talking about the open source project. It is changing the way and how we build and operate our apps. And if you haven't seen that in the data center, you're going to start seeing more of it, right? For the last 10 years, the virtual machine has been the king in the data center, right? Then everyone said, hey, you know what? The virtual machine doesn't provide it provides a lot of benefit, but it also provides a lot of underutilization of the resources that are there, right? So we need to be more performant in the data center. So here comes the container, and the container enters into the data center. And I actually think that there's plenty of room for both, and they're used for very different things. And I can explain that. But if you look at this slide here, these are the people that have signed into the Cloud Foundry organization. They have come on board. They realize that the way we build applications today and going forward and how we operate those is different than what we've been doing up to this point. So I would ask you, because this was a relatively new term for me this year until I kind of got into it this summer, what the hell is cloud native? What am I talking about, right? And I gave you a tiny URL there at the bottom so you can take a look at some of the articles that have been coming out lately about cloud native, but we're going to talk about what that means. Now, in my mind, I'm not going to spend time on the first two, but I do think it's important that you understand that. Cloud native, to actually create cloud native, it's a fundamental shift into the way we do things. So it starts with culture, right? If you remember back to the first slide, I said that building solutions from a software perspective is very risky. It takes 1 to 2 years to really build a solid system. And I'm not talking about a small, tiny app, right? Those you can build in 3 to 6 months, but a real solution, right? It took Netflix, a good chunk of time to actually build what you see today. To support, 70 million users. You don't just do that out of the box. But you have to have a cultural change the way you do that. I think with that, the values are different with what we do today in terms of building apps. Those values of any good organization, and an organization always has values, the values here are around testing and release, right? We've kind of been really focusing on testing the last few years, or even more, right, with test-driven development, all those kind of things, but now it's really about the release. If software is a risky business, how do you reduce the risk? You put your application out there and you start getting feedback, right? And that's my next point, communication. If I don't release the application, and I'm not saying just releasing it to your end user, but even to your testers, to anybody within the company, if you're not releasing it and they're not consuming it to tell you that, hey, you're on the mark or this thing is a piece of junk, let's go a different direction, then we're not doing things correctly. And I'll be honest with you, I have been with Cloud Foundry for the last couple of years, and I've watched us do this. The reason that Pivotal is called Pivotal is because it will change on a dime. We change to meet what customers want, and I'll explain to you when we did that. And then the last section, of course, is around the technologies that you use. So building a cloud-native application, you need a cloud-native platform to run that on and to operate those applications. And then you need really good release engineering. So release engineering to me is a bigger picture, right? Continuous delivery focuses on delivering the application. I think there's even more. If you start to think of the kind of scale of applications we're going to build, there is more to just continuous delivery. There's a full-on life cycle around release engineering. All right, so I had just done a presentation over there. We talked a little bit about this. For me, when it comes to cloud native, it always starts at the developer experience. If I don't remove the friction for the developer to be able to do their job, it's going to be difficult. That is why things like Docker took off. That is why things like an unstructured platform really came into being, because it made building applications easy, because guess what? They didn't have any security and compliance to deal with. They didn't have to worry about what network they were running on. They just pushed their application out there. That was not a concern for them. It's changed, right? In the enterprise data center, you can't just put your application on any network. And as a developer, I don't really want to spend my time worrying about what network I'm actually on. I just want to build my application and push it. As part of this, I do believe there's two pieces here. There's cloud-native applications, and this is like, what do the patterns look like when you go to build these cloud-native applications? It's different. If you actually look at the architecture used by Netflix, those patterns are way different than the patterns that we've used to build applications today. And if you're going to build that kind of distributed system with a microservice architecture, you need to follow some of these patterns. Cloud-native operations really take a look at how do we operate this once the application comes into my environment, and not operate it in the fashion that my operator is going to go out and write a bunch of scripts to make things all glued together. How do I do that in an automated fashion? That's actually way more trickier than just writing a bunch of scripts and thinking that you're going to operate it day one, and day two you're not going to worry about it, because in day two you do have to worry about it. And then I said, in my opinion, the glue to all of this is release engineering. So making that automation and delivery of the applications onto the platform is the most important piece. So let's just talk a little bit about what cloud native means. So if you're not familiar, I think at the bottom layer we always have these staples of the data center. You have your compute, you have your networking, you have your storage. From an application perspective, all I want to make sure is that my application is consuming the compute that I want, and at the right level, because based on expected use. I care about what networks I get put on, what policy goes there. I don't care so much about the policy, honestly. I do think that the operators do. But I just want to make sure that I have access to the right networks. My application can do that. And then storage, right? Storage as a service. If you don't think that S3 has changed the way that we use storage in the data center, then you're crazy. I hear more use cases for S3 than I've ever heard before in my life. But it's great, right? It actually provides some kind of value. But let's abstract across that. We know that's there already. Let's move into the cloud-native operation. As the operator of such a platform, you need to be worried about the provisioning and lifecycle management of this platform. Well, so this really focuses on day one and day two. Day one, I provision it. Day two, what happens when a security vulnerability comes into my platform? I need tools and automation to do that. With Cloud Foundry, that's straight out of the box. You don't have to do anything about that. Now, from a developer's perspective, you get more into orchestration and scheduling. When I push that component into the platform, and that component could be your software bits, it could be a Docker container, and in the future, those are the things we support today, but in the future, that could be a Vagrant file where I go and spin up a VM with all the Vagrant information in for you. It could potentially be a VM, right? Those are the types of things that we can support in this platform if that's something of interest to people. And I bring that up because if that is of interest to you and you think that's interesting, those are the feature sets we want to hear about, right? That's that communicative feedback that we're looking for. When you push into the platform, of course, health management. Does it tell me if my application instances are up? Do I keep a desired state versus an actual state in terms of app instances? And do I remediate that action? I want that to be part of the platform, not something that I have to write or worry about. And that's part of what Cloud Foundry does. Of course, scaling would be one of the things we always do. Then containerization. So we don't care what container we want to use, whether you want to use the native container to Cloud Foundry or Docker, It doesn't matter. In the future, it could be Vagrant, right? Now you get into some of the more interesting pieces as you build your application, and those are the services. So these are the databases, these are the messaging buses, these are the components of your platform that are part of the application architecture. But it doesn't have to just stop there. This could be the developer tools. This could be a load balancing tool that can scale up in your data center and test your application at 50 million users, right? We don't have to limit ourselves. And you see that with some of the partnerships we have out here in the booth over next to us. Of course, when you consolidate all of these applications into a platform, you have a lot of logs and metrics. So how do I drain that out of those containers? Because I don't want to do it as a developer, but it's necessary for me to troubleshoot, to understand, to analyze. That's all part of the platform. You don't have to worry about doing it. It's done for you. And then I'm going to go into the last piece, and I'll skip the other two, but the load balancing and app routing. This is a very significant piece to what Cloud Foundry does that a lot of other platforms don't do. And that is give you control at the routing layer. And the reason why this is so important is because of the agility of when you push applications into your platform. So as a developer, if I can control the routes and what traffic goes to which application, I can do all kinds of things. And we're gonna see that today when I do a blue-green deployment in our demo. The blue-green deployment allows me to do side-by-side deployments. I've had customers ask for 5 to 8 years to be able to do this. We've just made it super easy and super efficient. So that is a very significant piece to what Cloud Foundry provides. All right, let me just jump up to the cloud native apps and we'll keep moving here. This is where we start to look at how do we build these types of cloud native apps. And when I talk about cloud native, you've probably heard a lot about monolith, right? It's kind of the big bulky piece that kind of fits together, and it has its place in building applications and the type of application you want to build. But usually over time, what you start to realize is that that application may not do the things that I need it to do at the kind of scale that I need it to do it at. And that's where we start to kind of move down to what a cloud native app is. I would argue in a platform like this, keeping external configuration outside of your platform is always a very good idea. So in Cloud Foundry, we offer these services so that you can configure the configuration outside and pull that in and change that on the fly as need fit for your application without having to restart your application, because most applications typically do that upon load. I'll lump these two together, service and service registration and discovery. As you start to build these applications, you're going to need some kind of way of discovering these services and understanding where these services are at, how to access them, and how to provide a level of indirection in there so that you can change when that service gets called or a new version of that service comes up. One of the things that you'll see with something like Spring Boot is that metrics creation thing. And this has been a big issue at Etsy, and I think in one of the keynotes they talked about this. But anytime you put an application into production, you have to be able to collect metrics around it. You have to know what it's doing. You have to collect operational metrics as well as metrics within the application. And what we've done with Spring is we built that right into the application. You don't have to do anything special to do that. We can grab those metrics out and start putting them on a plot and start plotting them to see how are they doing over time. Those kind of more what I would consider looking at the performance and predictive analytics of the performance of your application. External connectivity. Who can, from the outside, connect to my services, and how do I protect them? These are all things that are built into the platform that come as services inside of Cloud Foundry. So I had mentioned the glue, in my mind, was around the release engineering, right? Today we look at that as being continuous delivery, but I think as the scale of that continues to go up, you're going to see it change a lot differently. So for apps, it's much easier. Continuous delivery is much easier because you're really only impacting probably your app and any dependent other apps that you have on that. And most of us don't have an application that has 500 dependencies of microservices yet, right? But it gets to be more challenging. So as we go through release engineering, you can see that we do a lot much better job in the build and the continuous integration aspect of it. And at Pivotal, we actually don't even have test teams. We don't have testers on our teams. We don't do that. Because what we do is we spend so much time on the test from the time that you start that we want to build that level of confidence in the person that's delivering it so they don't have to worry about the test. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't times that we don't let bugs through. Of course we do, right? And sometimes we make big mistakes, but we still always drive to that level of testing that we don't, that we have a level of confidence in what we deliver. Of course, then you then get into the continuous delivery and deployment, and I'm gonna talk about what that means for us in terms of a platform. But I think what's really important about release engineering and what the platform provides is this level of agility at the platform level. So I had mentioned this blue-green deployment technique, having the ability to do side-by-side deployments, having the ability to change a route to decide that, holy crap, if I release something that really sucked, I can change that route back in a matter of seconds and start driving traffic the other way, right? I mean, if I can reduce the risk it takes to push an application, then I can really question what the heck does production really mean. But if I can't do that, then all I do is have a lot of stress and tension in my environment. All right, so I want to give you an example of something that we do at Pivotal Labs that is geared around our release engineering. So PWS, which is Pivotal Web Services, is something that is basically Cloud Foundry on top of AWS. So this is our test environment that we have customers push their applications to. VMware has a couple of applications out here, and some others do too. And it's a paid service. And so in this year so far, we have 5,500 app instances, so you can consider that 5,500 containers running at any given time. We have 35,000 active users using this. I actually just was in the office yesterday, or Monday, and we have a big dashboard. You can walk in and you can see all this stuff. We have 5,000 routes for that, and we've done 20 platform upgrades of this environment with 0 downtime. So our release engineering is really focused on making sure that this is always operational. And the way we end up doing this is a technique or a technology that's part of the open source community called BOSH. And I won't go into details about that, but this allows us to have that level. That is also something that comes out of the box that you can deliver in your own data center, which is a phenomenal capability. Okay, so I had mentioned it, right? What is the blue-green deployment? Just wanted to show you a little bit what the pattern looks like. You have your initial application deployed, which we're calling blue in this case. You can see it has an app route assigned to it. In step 2 here, we actually deploy the side-by-side in green, and we assign a new route to that. So we have all the traffic still going to the original route, and the new route is up and available. You could do all kinds of testing with that new route before you actually open it up. And then you start the conversion process over, where you assign the route to both instances. And it's load balancing across the blue and the green. And mind you, this is done in a matter of seconds. This isn't something that takes forever. But the platform will take care of draining everybody off the blue and onto the green as they complete their interactions. And then finally, you have just the green. And in this case, the blue is not gone. It's just not on the diagram. But it's still there, right? Because if I want to roll back, I just switch the route again. Now I've reduced some of the risk for testing things out. So now you can do A/B testing. Now you can do, side-by-side comparisons and kind of get feedback from people within the organization and outside of your organization. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to kind of show you some of the things that I put together. Now, I call this a simple pipeline demo because it's really me building with Jenkins, pushing to Cloud Foundry. There's a little bit of focus on promotion of that, and then doing a blue-green deployment. But I consider this simple. This is not a monolith, or this is a monolithic architecture. It doesn't have 1,000 microservices. I don't do all the dependency stuff yet. Those are things that I definitely have on my radar, but I just haven't done those yet. So, before I get started, let me explain to you what you're going to see, just so that way when you watch the video, you're not confused. So, Cloud Foundry has a foundation, and as part of that foundation, and when I talk about foundation, this is a technical thing. This is an installation of Cloud Foundry. It has an app console, which is the developer's view into this cloud-native platform. And that's how they interact with it. That's where they could go scale. That's where they could add additional memory. They can create new services in the marketplace and all that kind of stuff. On the right-hand side is the ops console. This is where the operator interacts with Cloud Foundry. It will create these tiles that actually show up in the marketplace. This is where they do their update and start that process of delivering an update across the platform. And then on the lower left, you have the marketplace. This is where developers can come in and instantiate these services and then bind them to their applications. And then on the right-hand side, the orgs over there kind of talks about how we structurally organize things together so that you're assigned to organizations and your role-based access control goes to an organization and you can see certain things within that organization. Okay, so simple little diagram of what we're going to do here. So I'm going to make a local change on my desktop. I may use Docker to either package that or download Docker images to my local desktop to do some testing against. And we also have another technology that's called Lattice, which is like a little mini Cloud Foundry where you can pull Docker images down and do the same type of thing. From that, what I'm going to do is then to push my code changes out to GitHub. GitHub obviously will have a hook that'll call back into Jenkins that's running on-premise in my environment. Jenkins will start the build process. And then what we will do is we'll use the Cloud Foundry plugin that comes with Jenkins to actually push those into the correct organizations within Cloud Foundry. Okay. So I'll try to describe what is going on here. Hopefully it'll make a lot of sense to you guys. So we have our deployed map application. And we'll just take a quick look at it. I know that it's a little small, so I apologize for that. If I would have known that, I would have blown it up much bigger. So here you are, you're taking a look at the routes. So I can see I have 2 routes assigned to it. One route is my development route, the route that every time I push my application, that's the route I want to go to. Here are my logs that I can see, and here are the services that are bound to my application. Now I'm going to Pivotal Web Services, which is what I consider my hybrid cloud because that's running out on AWS. I have an instance deployed in there. It's instance 56 by the number in the top there. So this is the Jenkins build number that I used. You can see the routes that I have mapped to it. I have 2. One would consider the canonical route name, which makes life much easier. You always go to that route to see the latest and greatest. Here I'm just going through and looking at the logs and the services that are associated to that as well. Here is my application. So I will start the streaming of that information and my orders into my application, and then we can kind of zoom in and take a look. You can see that it's actually streaming here at the bottom. We're going to go over to the hybrid side or the public cloud, and this can run anywhere. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take a look at the application real quick. We'll zoom in on Texas and see the orders that are going there. All right. Now, my development manager came to me and said, it's time to earn your money, so I want to add a new feature. So I go through the process of creating this new feature. I have it local on my desktop. And I want to add a new button to the application. Of course, I cheated a little bit, and I've put that button ahead of time, commented it out because I knew what my manager was going to ask, and I wanted to look like I could turn around and do it really quick. I'll do my local testing. Here I may use Docker as a way to do some of this testing. Here I might use Lattice to do some of that testing. Now I have my new button in the upper right-hand corner, and I am now ready to start that process. I'm going to go ahead and check that in using Git. And once I do this merge, Jenkins is going to start saying, hey, you know what? I've got this thing and it's ready to be built. So while this is going, I'll come back to this, but a lot of times people kept asking me out in the conference, well, what is it that you guys do? So what you can consider Cloud Foundry is the end of continuous delivery. It's the location in where your applications run. So here we're going to go ahead and kick off, and you can see that in it has detected that we have those changes. It's going to start that process of building this out. Now this is easy, right? We've done this forever. Continuous integration. All right, big deal. So we've checked everything in, and we're going to build it. What you'll notice, though, is we have 2 downstream jobs here. So these downstream jobs will then do all the deployment into Cloud Foundry for me. And the way we do that is we use the CloudBees Hyperion plugin to do that. So these should start off here in just a second. Now, what you'll notice is, oh my God, the application is gone, right? It is gone because I didn't do a blue-green deployment. I just blew it away and pushed the new one out. So it's gone for the time being. This is something that I would see us doing in the development environment because we don't really care about necessarily keeping the old one around. We want to push it out and have people start testing it and playing with it, or I want to use it myself personally. Let's do the same thing in the hybrid cloud. Let's do that same push. So you'll see that coming up here shortly. Now we have build 57. If you remember before, it used to be 56. We have the route being identified. We have the logs because the application is starting up. The service is bound to it, so it's still the same service instance I had before. I just replaced the code. So I'm still receiving orders, but the code has changed. We're going to go back out into the other side of things, which is the hybrid cloud. Here again, we're pushing it to we're basically pushing it to totally two different data centers, and it's a very easy process because Cloud Foundry provides a command line interface which allows you to do very declarative type of pushes into it, like using the command line interface. It's very, very easy. In this case, we actually even use the plugin, which is based off of the CLI. All right, so 57 is running. This is running in the hybrid cloud, so this is running in the public cloud. Again, it went away. But when I bring it back up, now you can see I had both the awesome button in the on-premise data center, the awesome button in the off-premise data center, and I could have a global load balancer that's pushing traffic to both of these, right? Okay, real quickly, we will zoom in on that. Of course, I did this on the East Coast, so I wanted to make sure I picked an East Coast state because I didn't want them to be upset with me. Now we go in and we look in Artifactory, right? And so here's the integration, right? Artifactory integrates very nicely with Jenkins. Everybody knows that. We've used it that way for a long time. I'm just kind of showing you the way that I've set this up. Version 57 is right there. You can go through and you look at some of the job characteristics that are there as well. And then some of the build information. All of that was done for me, which was nice to be just done completely right out of the box. All right, now, some people see software promotion as they want a check and balance type of approach. So in this case, we're going to give them that check and balance where somebody's in the loop, right? This is hypothetical. Every organization does this slightly different, but all we're going to do is use the promotion capabilities that are built into Jenkins and Artifactory to promote it through to the next environment. And what this really ends up doing is making a copy of that library inside of Artifactory and moving it to a different repository inside of Artifactory. So now I have I have them separated, and I know what was released into production versus what was released into development, and they match. So that's all we're really doing in this case. We're stepping through and actually showing you where in that repository browser that actually lives. So you can see 57 there, and you'll be able to see 57 there as well. And then you can look at some of the details of the job itself. So what I'll show you next is now that we've done the promotion and we have the jars in the right location, we want to do that into production. So here is my on-premise version, version 41, if you can't see that. Version 41 in the data center on-premise. It's got 2 instances running. You can see the routes that are assigned to it. I have my external route that's assigned to it, my internal route that is assigned to it, the one that I use when I push it. Here I am looking at the public cloud. Same versions out there running, 41. Again, it'll have the correct routes from an internal perspective and an external perspective. So we end up taking a look at those. You can see the routes there. Right now, I still don't have that button in production because it's only done in development. Kind of get things kicked off here. I won't spend too much time on that. And all right, so now we're actually gonna go through that promotion process. So this is kind of a man in the loop type of a thing here. So we're gonna actually go pick the build that we wanna do. And based on that build, we'll go to Artifactory, we'll get the library that we have chosen, and we'll make sure that we push it to Cloud Foundry. And that's kind of what's happening here. And there's a job for the public cloud, and there's one for the private cloud. So again, we're selecting it. We will pick the space where we want to put that within Cloud Foundry, and then the domain name that we want to associate to it. So I've just kind of parameterized those to make it a little easier if I wanted to externalize my routes into Jenkins and create those as part of the build process. So here we go, we're starting that process. 41 is still running, it's taking on orders. 57 is coming online. We'll do the same thing in the public cloud. 41 is taking our orders on. 57 is coming online. And then when we're done, we will have fully transitioned over to 57, and the new orders will be taken there. Okay, so you can see the routes here. So you can see right now there's no route for the external because I'm not done getting it up and going. I haven't done the switchover. I have not changed those routes. And what you'll see next is when that does happen, and I will apologize, there's a little bit of a pause coming up here, and I think this might be it. This is almost the end of the video, but I didn't get a chance to cut it out. A lot of people ask, well, why don't you do the live demo? I was going to do the live demo in the East Coast, and I'm glad I didn't because the network really was bad that day. And so I try to do this here because it's easier for me to control the time and make it, so you guys have more time to ask questions at the end and stuff. So, all right, we'll refresh, and hopefully we should see that it's been converted over. 57 now is up and running. Both containers are running. It's live. And if you'll notice, the route has been changed over, so now all the traffic is draining, or is moving to this new instance and draining off of the old one. Now, depending on the time of day that you do something like that, you may not necessarily have to worry too much about draining. You could schedule a job to run at a time that's way more convenient to cut over. You don't have to do it as part of the delivery mechanism. There's all kinds of things that you can do to automate the delivery of this. And now in production, I have the awesome button. So it's kind of gone from development, from my desktop to my development environment, started getting some feedback from people, and now it's all the way up into production. All right, so I just came up with a small list of best practices and lessons. I'm not going to go too much detail about this. I did add one that I got asked about at the other conference. Definitely, I would use the CloudBees Jenkins CF plugin. I've tried some of the other open source ones. They didn't work quite as well. And when I tried to contact the committer, they were a little bit slow in getting back to me, but it was okay. I mean, I think they eventually got to it. But the way that you identify unique builds within your environment, you can use the hash commits from something like GitHub, or you can use the build numbers for versioning. That's really up to you. I didn't really want to mandate that that's a best practice, but that's more of what you think makes the most sense. I will say the canonical route name for ease of use and external access is almost imperative when it comes to Cloud Foundry. You can assign any DNS name you want inside of Cloud Foundry, and you can give names to any of your applications any way you want. I prefer to use external route names, things that I know I can control, and then use a bunch of internal route names, things that don't really matter to anybody but me or people on my team. I got this question, and I thought this was really good. So database migrations. You can tell here I kind of shied away from the database migration because that's a bigger issue. But there are solutions out there like FlyWayDB, which can be used for database migrations. Of course, it's not polyglot, so it only supports really Java. But if that's your main focus, you might consider using that. Control of configuration details, environment variables, anything we can stick in SCM always makes our life easier because we can version and control it. And then also, when we create our design pipelines, multi-cloud for portability and scale is always definitely important. But what I want to do is run a few of these ideas by you and make you guys have a few thoughts on the way out, just to see what your thoughts were. When I originally started this, I started looking at Jenkins workflows and asynchronous pipelines and checkpoints because this is something that's very much needed in terms of continuous delivery. As you're going through and something fails, how do you stop? How do you make a checkpoint? How do you hydrate that information? How do you dehydrate that information and then continue on? I did not go down this route when I originally did this design for this talk, mainly because it was earlier on and I was just becoming more comfortable with it. The second reason I didn't go down that line was that a lot of people didn't want to write code. They wanted to have the checkbox approach that Jenkins provides for you in the ease of use, so I kind of shied away from that. Orchestration of microservices. So as your applications really start to become cloud native and you start building out 50 or 25 or 50 services, orchestrating that at a microservice level, that's why I started talking about release engineering, because that takes a little more thought, right? I mean, you have to understand how those pieces all fit together. Docker images via Cloud Foundry, and Diego is just the next release of Cloud Foundry that's coming out shortly. I actually demonstrated that over there, what it's like to be able to push a container. So we have containers internal to Cloud Foundry that we can set up for you automatically, or you can go and create the container yourself, put all the stuff inside of it, and then push it in Cloud Foundry. We actually we're not too opinionated about that. That's really probably more of an operational choice than it is a developer's choice. The folks at CloudBees are working and taking this and making it large scale for a platform to this level. And I kind of brought this up because I think this is a good future talk, something that it would be really nice to be able to say, okay, this is the number of masters and slaves that I need to do, and this is the operations centers and all of those pieces fitting together. And then I also wanted to provide you with an alternative to the CF plugin, or sorry, to the CF blue-green deployment that I just showed, which is called Autopilot. If you go to plugins at cloudfoundry.org, you can find a number of plugins that make operating and interacting with Cloud Foundry much easier. An example of this is Live Stats. It's one of my favorites. It's written by one of our support guys. But it allows you to graph the performance of your application without having to actually get into the application. So it's a pretty neat plugin. And with that, I did create some instructional information. If you're interested in that, I put that on GitHub. So you are more than welcome to take a look at that and give me feedback if there's something that you don't like. But what I tried to do was capture the stuff that I did here to show you into something that you might be able to actually use. So some of the scripting that I used and stuff like that, that's all. Some of it, I will tell you, the scripts kind of go away because the product itself is evolved so quickly as I'm doing this stuff that by 3 or 4 or 5 months into it, some of that stuff goes away. But it's still there if you're interested. I will say some of it's written in Bash Shell. I am not the best Bash Shell scripter in the world, so just keep that in mind. Please don't criticize my code, at least that code. So anyway, with that, that was what I wanted to share with you guys around Cloud Native. Hopefully you feel like you have a little better understanding of what Cloud Native is. I do think that this will be the direction that the data center goes, whether you need a full-on platform to run Cloud Native, or if you're still building monoliths and you still just want an easy way to push those into an operational environment that allows the application and the container to end up on the right networks and with the right compute and resources. I still think that's the direction where you're going to see things go. So hopefully you learned a little something. If not, I apologize, but can't please everybody. So, well, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it. Thank you.